All right, back to work. Time to fix this panel that I screwed up. If you follow my channel for car projects, you probably realize what's about to happen. If you stumbled upon this video for bathroom projects, you may be confused as to why I spray painted, rather terribly, my panel black. I'm going to do what we call block sanding with a guide coat. Block sanding with a block that is perfectly flat, and guide coat with something that I intend to get rid of and not keep. So the theory behind it is if you have a low spot and you sand it with a perfectly flat block, the low spot will stay black and the paint will disappear from the high spots. So I can see I've got a low spot right there. So if I start sanding, you can see the black starts to disappear except for the low spot. So I've got two options. I can either keep sanding the high spot until it's gone and I sand the low spot, or if the spot is significantly lower than everything else, I can fill the low spot. So I am going to block off the whole thing, and anything that this is really low, this is an 1/8 low, I'll probably fill that with a little thickened epoxy. But anything that's just a little bit low, it's a dip, I'll sand out, and we'll see how long that takes. But that way I'll know this panel's flat before I try my second attempt at top coating it. And this panel was in a lot worse shape than I thought it was, and I might have gone a little overboard with the block sanding, with the exception of these edges here. This thing is ready to be painted gloss black. Not that I'm going to, but I could, because it is flat. And it probably didn't have to be this flat, because epoxy does self-level, and as long as the low spots were irregular, not something that looked man-made like stripes, it probably would have been okay. But I don't have to worry about that. I've already done a little bit of filling on the edge on this section here. I'm just using some automotive body filler. After I prime it and epoxy it, that'll be completely watertight. So I got to go back and touch up the edges on this section here with some body filler. While that kicks, I'm going to go back and flatten the edges that aren't pre-finished, and hopefully I'll get this thing primed tonight so we can get a second color coat tomorrow. About 4 hours of blocking on this thing. It is finally ready for another coat of primer. And one thing I decided I'm going to do this time is not mask off these edges, and I'm just going to let them bleed and blend, and hopefully they'll come out okay. But yeah, fixing to put another coat of kilts on it so that tomorrow night I can do another color coat. So 4 hours, it's about twice as long as I thought it would take. But once you get through the top layer, if you get into the structural layer, as I said in another video, that epoxy with thickener in it sands like concrete. And it made an absolutely mess in the air-conditioned bay over there where I was sanding. So I had to move the panel over here to prime it, and then I'll have to go over there and completely clean that. But that'll be a tomorrow night problem. Tonight, primer and bed. I'm getting ready to make my second run at the big panel. After the last one, which looked great with the exception of being able to see the grooves from the notch trowel in the structural layer that was way too thick, it has been blocked perfectly flat and re-primed. I really rounded off the corners so that the epoxy will flow a lot better on the edges, and hopefully I don't wind up with all those kind of bubbles I did last time, or pockets. I've also decided not to mask off the seals and the caddy. I'm just gonna let it overrun and mix and meld. Last time I did this one, I mixed up 4 gallons because I knew I had a very uneven surface. And I only used 3.5. So this time I'm gonna mix up 2 gallons, and I pulled out over a gallon last time of silver. That was way too much. I barely used it, and I thought it was too much silver actually. So this time I'm only gonna do maybe a half of a pint of silver, and really just about that much in the bottom of that cup for the copper. And I'm gonna pour all the white out and make sure that it covers and it self-levels. If it doesn't, I've got another gallon of epoxy I can mix up, make an extra gallon of white. But if it covers and everything smooths out, then I'll be able to apply the silver and the copper. I'm gonna try and get a little video of applying the silver and the copper, but it's really hard to do because I need 2 hands and one to work the camera. But I'll do my best to see if I can't maybe get just a little video of it for those of you who haven't been able to go watch the Stone Countertops guys videos. So fixing to get to mixing. 2 gallons of epoxy, 2 bags of white metallic, 2 bags of diamond dust metallic, and then just a little bit of silver and copper. I've got 2 gallons of white on, and it feels like it's not quite leveling like it should. So I'm gonna give it about 5 minutes. I can still kind of see some streaks there. If it doesn't level like it should, that's a good key. You don't quite have enough. I'll mix up that last gallon, but I'm gonna give it about 5 minutes. But when I can see something like that, it lets me know that probably don't have quite enough on here for it to self-level. So with 2 gallons, it did eventually level out, but I went ahead and put the 3rd gallon on, not for leveling, but for coverage. The kilts had a bit of a golf ball look to it because I didn't put a heavy coat of the kilts on. And so you can kind of see a little bit of splotchiness in it. And that was kind of peeking through with only 2 gallons. So I added the 3rd gallon, and it's covering really well. The white metallic and the diamond dust looks, I don't know how well it shows up on camera. It looks just killer. I'm tempted to almost not put any silver or copper in here. It gets its own little marbling effect because it's a mica powder. But I'm gonna go ahead with the silver. I mean, the sills are, and the caddy already have silver on them. So I'm gonna see if I can get a video of this. I've just got a little bit of silver here in a cup. I'm going to take these brushes right here and dip it in there, and then I'm gonna kind of just chop it and swirl it around on the white, and it'll create that smoky marble pattern. So we'll do just a little bit of this one-handed, and then I'll put the camera down, and so get it on there nice and thick. Come up here and then just kind of swirl it around a little bit with your brush, and it's gonna move as it levels and flows, and so you don't have to be perfect with it. Just kind of get some random patterns going. It'll move and flow, and it'll look very natural when you're done with it. So you can see how the copper just kind of swirls, and, or excuse me, the silver kind of swirls and smooths itself out. I put a lot less in than I did last time, so this panel's a lot brighter, more white. The diamond dust really sparkles and shows off. And so what I'm gonna do now, next step, is the copper, and I'm just adding veins for that. So you just mix it up, get a little bit on the thing, and then you just drizzle your veins in right where you want them. And then they will kind of flow and smooth themselves out as well. And now for the most satisfying part, popping bubbles. Just take your torch. Wave it across, and all the bubbles disappear. And the last thing I have to do, now that all the bubbles are gone, is I have to come through and just rub these edges, the exposed ones. The ones that are going to be hidden don't matter so much, but just rub them so they don't develop streaks on them. If you're going to develop little drips at the bottom, it's okay. You can just sand those off, or hit them with a multi-tool. But on the flat surfaces, you don't want to have to be sanding through too much of grooves and drips that develop. So just rub them down and then they'll self-level. So I'll continue to do that for a couple hours until it's tacky and provides real resistance when I run my finger across it. That's when I'll stop rubbing the edges. And you can rub the bottoms if you want. That'll just make the drips smaller, but in my opinion, it actually makes them a little harder to deal with. If you let them big, it's easier to hit them with a multi-tool than if you let them get long. Or if you cut them off short or rub them off short, they're harder to hit with a multi-tool and you gotta sand them, which is messier than just hitting them with a multi-tool and cutting them off flush. So that's it. This panel needs about 12 to 16 hours to get and dry. And then it'll get scuffed with some 220 on the DA. And then we'll get the ultimate top coat on it. And it'll be ready for install. I'm getting ready to do the ultimate top coat on the big panel. It's been sanded with some 220 grit. This thing came out looking amazing. It looks a lot more like natural marble than the first attempt because the first attempt had way too much silver in it. So I'm super stoked with this. I'm gonna mix up about a half of a batch of the ultimate top coat based on how much it took me to do the shower floor and roll this out. This time we're going, I don't remember what I did last time, but this time we're gonna go red for wet and black for dry. You roll it on wet, roll it off dry, get a nice thin eggshell coat on here. It gets really hard and protects this surface. It's very interesting that the ultimate top coat is very foamy. It's supposed to be a very hard coating, and maybe in a thin layer it is, but what you got left over turns into great stuff. I'm getting ready to install the big panel. I just went through and used a multi-tool and a sander to smooth off the back edge. And now for the big reveal. It should fit because it was glued together in place. I take it in there and put it back and make sure that all the epoxy I've added doesn't affect the fit too much. Okay, the panel is in. Had to do a little bit of sanding on this corner right here because things were actually just a little tight down here. Just the buildup of the epoxy as it dripped over the edge was more than I'd accounted for. I had this panel fit really tight, but it was much easier to sand a little foam off the back here than it was to sand the epoxy off of there. Plus that's part of the watertight seal. So it's in, kind of hold it in place. I ran a screw in and then jammed some hotel cards, my favorite spacer, up in there to hold it nice and tight. Everything else is fitting really good. So this thing's gonna dry while I start working on the next phase.